So I've been listening to the Beatles since I was 8. And it wasn't until 7th grade when I realized that most people I know either don't care about the Beatles or think they're overrated. And that's fine. Music is subjective. You like what you like and you dislike what you dislike. But I've also found that a lot of people don't know why the Beatles are held in such high regard. So I wanted to really give a deep dive into the influence of the Beatles and find out for people who aren't into them or people who are getting into them, and also myself, why the Beatles are put on such a pedestal, or maybe even why they're overrated. First, let's look at the achievements of the Beatles. So they've had 20 number one songs, 19 number one albums. They've sold 183 million albums, 48 gold, 42 platinum, 26 multi-platinum, and a record 6 diamond. On April 4th, 1964, they held all top 5 spots on Billboard, and they are the only band to ever do that. They have 10 Grammys. In 1972, they were given the Grammys Trustee Award, and that was only 2 years after they broke up. And the following recipient was Thomas Edison. They have 4 Brit Awards, an Oscar, and you get the idea. So in terms of success, they are the highest selling band ever, and they've been given the most prestigious awards that you could want as an artist. Okay, so they made a lot of money, and some people thought they were really good. Same applies to Nickelback. Nothing impressive. So let's look at some of the changes in how we listen to and record music that's credited to the Fab Four. They made being a band popular. Like, before them, you had a lot of solo artists, or you would have a solo artist and the band, like Buddy Holly and the Crickets. But with them, it was just the name of the band. They were all equal parts, and they were all equally the focus, and that wasn't really a thing before them. They also made it popular to write and perform your own songs. There were, of course, people doing this, but not in pop music. These guys were writing all of their material. But before this, you would have pop stars who were performing songs written by people who specialized in writing songs, like places like the Brill Building and things like that. Like before the Beatles, the big name was Elvis. And Elvis didn't write any of his songs. The Beatles only wrote their own songs, except for the occasional cover here and there. Now, as for technical innovations, there's a lot of argument over whether the Beatles were actually the first people to do a lot of these. So, we'll say they are the first mainstream band to do these. They were the first mainstream band to use looping, which is when you have a section of a track repeat over and you play over it. They were the first mainstream band to use guitar feedback in a song, which is this sound. They were the first mainstream band to use backmasking, which is when you record a section of a song backwards and then put it into the song that way. It's often associated with hiding messages in the song, especially with the Beatles. They were the first mainstream band to use double tracking, which is when you have 2 of the same recordings played over top each other. Before the Beatles, the way that this worked is you would have an artist record a song, and then they would record it over top of it again. So you had to perform it twice. They were the first band to use it to where it was automatically the same recording, just recorded twice. They started the British invasion, which is when British musical artists were actually getting popular in the US. Before that, we pretty much, in the States, just stuck to our own homegrown guys. And without that, we wouldn't have... No, I can't think of any other British artists that came after the Beatles. I don't think there's been any other. No. I don't think so. They were one of the first artists to have music videos that were more than just a recording of a performance. And they were also the first to have those videos featured on TV in a way similar to how MTV would show music videos later on. They were the first band to play a stadium, Shea Stadium, in 1966. And then they were the first band to do a stadium tour. They really helped to bring Eastern music into Western music, like on songs like Norwegian Wood, which was the first major pop song in the West to feature sitar, and they did that with lots of different Indian instruments and styles and structures. They possibly invented, but at the very least contributed to the invention of metal, punk, psychedelia, indie, art rock, prog, doom, acid rock, and they're also credited with a lot more than that, but those are the big ones that you can really pinpoint a song. Okay, so that's a lot to take in, but yeah, they changed some stuff about how we record music and play music and listen to music, and they helped bring in new sounds to music. But that's nerd stuff. A band should be remembered for the quality of their music and their skill as musicians. Well, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the Beatles' music is inherently good. Music is subjective, like I said before, and it's okay for you to not like music that other people around you do like. But let me list some musical reasons why people tend to think that they were really good. First of all, these four guys were just incredibly musically inclined. None of them were virtuosos of their instrument, but they had incredible feel. They knew what sounded good, and they knew how to groove with whatever they were playing, even if that meant going outside of what the norm was as far as sounds go of that time. Ringo, their drummer, for example, he wasn't impressive because of how complicated his rhythms were or because of how fast he could play. He was impressive because he could consistently come up with very unique rhythms or beats or patterns that pretty well perfectly accented whatever music he was playing with. And he helped innovate a lot of unusual ways of playing that then you never would have been taught by a drum instructor, but now are commonplace in drumming. I could talk all day about why Ringo is one of the best drummers of all time, and I'm not going to do that, but he's my favorite drummer ever, and the same applies to the other three Beatles. They were just incredibly good at feeling the groove of a song and going with it, and just playing whatever would sound good, and stretching the limits of what we thought you could play. Aside from their instruments, they all had incredibly good ears for harmony. They were all four really good singers, some better than others, but they were all really good. They all sang on different albums and different songs. And also, they had a really good understanding of what good song structure was. They could write a catchy song without it being annoying, and they could really convey whatever emotion they wanted to through the lyrics as well as through the music. And this is the last point on this section. Keep in mind that these guys accomplished everything that they did in 8 years. And second half of those 8 years, they actually stopped playing live. They just became a recording band. And they never reunited. It's kind of insane. Like, take the Rolling Stones, for example. They are commonly compared to the Beatles. They're often pitted head to head. The Rolling Stones have been together for 60 years. They never broke up. They continued touring their entire careers. And honestly, I don't think without the following couple decades after the Beatles broke up that the Stones would be compared to the Beatles. They accomplished a lot in those following decades. They're a great band. Not saying they're not. But that was a big time for them. And not to mention, John and Paul actually wrote the Rolling Stones' first big hit. Or how about this? The Beatles and Taylor Swift are the only two artists to have 5 albums sit at number 1 for 6 weeks. It took Taylor, one of the best songwriters and biggest stars of at least the past 20 years, 12 years to do it. And the Beatles actually have her beat by 7 albums. And before you're like, oh, they've had more history, only one of those albums came out after they broke up. It's kind of huge. So a lot of that could be argued as subjective or just selling more albums. So if you don't care about the accolades or musical innovation or skill, then finally, let's talk about cultural impact. We already talked about the British invasion. They helped bring other big British artists into America, but also they made it more common for guys to have long hair. Now we see their hair and we're just like, it's a bowl cut. But back then it was unusually long for a guy. And it became a sign of rebellion, fighting the earlier generation. Back to that Eastern influence, they really helped bring Eastern styles as far as clothing goes into the West. A lot of that would be adopted into hippie culture, and then it just kind of became normal style as it is today. They, of course, inspired an entire generation of copycat bands that were manufactured to have the same look, style, and effect on people that the Beatles did in their early years, which, of course, would then go on to become the corporately manufactured boy band that continues to be pretty big today. And finally, they used their influence to show their support of different social activisms like the civil rights movement, women's rights, gay rights, environmentalism. They really used it for a lot of good purposes. The one thing about the Beatles that you can't deny is that they were cultural icons. Despite whether or not you think their music was good, or that they were good people, or that they had a positive impact on culture, the Beatles was and is one of the biggest names in cultural history. Thanks for watching this far. I hope you learned something from this. I know I did. I did more research for this video on the Beatles than I ever have, and I learned a lot. They're one of my favorite bands ever. They've contributed a ton to my life in and out of music. I love their stuff. So tell me what your favorite Beatles song is, if you have one, or why you don't like the Beatles. Why are they overhyped? If you enjoyed this, I actually have another Beatles video coming out soon, so if you want to check that out, or just more videos about music, please check out my other stuff, subscribe. My whole channel is just about finding new music and new ways to appreciate music, so please let me know what music you think I should check out. I'm always looking for new stuff. And most importantly, go listen to something new. Listen to something outside of your bubble and try new sounds. Go be adventurous in your music. I think it's something that was inside of me all along that I didn't know was there. Hellacious, demonic, satanic. It's like I've been growing a demon inside of me.